Happy to introduce Andy Goldfine, the owner, founder of the business. I've had the pleasure of working with him for 33 years. Without further ado, Andy.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you all for coming. My talk today breaks into 4 parts, and it was hard for me to figure out and guess at the sequence of the parts. And I think the way I'm going to do it is part 1 will be the history of the startup and why and how the world came together to let us start this business. Part 2 will be thanking people. And part 3 will be some of my theories about why motorcycling is good for you and good for society in general. And then part 4 will be Q&A. So the beginning was a confluence of factors. The first part is that I always liked riding and skiing and sailing and activities that involved balance. I can take you to, I grew up here, and I can take you to the spot, the exact spot where my mother released the saddle of my 20-inch bicycle without training wheels for the first time, and I was balancing till I fell down. But then I got back up and went around and did it a second time, and I was balancing. And that was like the bird leaving the nest for the first time when the little birdie has wings. Suddenly my world opened up, and I rode my 20-inch bicycle all over this city, and I was always late for dinner, but I loved the sensations and the feelings of riding. One of probably my most heroic ride, bicycle or motorcycle, ever, came shortly after that. I was, 9 years old. It was before they had Stingray-style bicycles. I had a standard 20-inch wheeled kid bicycle. The bridge connecting Duluth and Superior opened that year. And today that bridge down the center line has a concrete divider to prevent people from having head-on collisions on that bridge. But when it was opened, it was built by the federal government on a very tight budget. Technically it's a pretty cheap bridge as those things go. But the space between the opposing 4 lanes was like 24 inches wide, elevated from the roadbed by 4 inches or so, and the center, because they wanted a lightweight, cheap-to-build bridge, the center was one of those grids you can look down through the mesh and see the water. And then there was the 2 opposing lanes, and I was 9, and this was on the news every night, and the ribbon cutting and all the hoopla to connect Duluth and Superior, and I thought this would be a really fun, cool, I could ride across this bridge. So one day, I rode down here from my home on the east hillside part of Duluth, and I figured out and got on that center mesh and rode over to Superior, and looking down at the water the whole way while the opposing cars are going in either directions, and some of them were blowing their horns. Like I didn't know what I was doing at 9 years old. They thought it was inappropriate for a child to be out there on that bridge but going between the lanes. I remember it all very clearly until I called one of my parents from Superior to say, guess what I just did? And I completely post-traumatic stress syndrome took over at that point. And I'm sure one of my parents said, you stay right there, young man. And then they came and got me, threw the bicycle probably in the back of their car, took me home, and you stay in your room or something. I don't know. I have no memory of once I called my parents to brag about that achievement. There's nothing in my memory anymore. But it was an achievement, It was a lot of fun, and I like riding a lot, that much. And I will circle back to that at the part 3 of this when I tell you a little bit about my theories about why motorcycling is good for us and good for society. So I continued to ride bicycles. I started my motorized riding with a $100 mini bike with a lawnmower engine, which I blew up with. It had a centrifugal clutch. The brake pedal was a spoon that pressed on the rear tire. And I wrecked the motor on that probably within weeks of owning it. And then I had to save money from my allowance or doing chores or whatever it was till I could buy a replacement lawnmower motor, which was also the beginning of when I started collecting hand tools, wrenches and things like that, because nobody in my family was mechanical. Nobody in my family rode a motorcycle. But eventually, a year later, I got the mini bike running again. And then a couple of years later, I had a driver's license at 16 and got a Honda 90 motorcycle, and then I don't remember the next one, maybe a 175. After the 175, I thought I was a grown-up rider. I was probably around 100 pounds, and I saw a BSA 441 Victor. Very pretty bike. And I switched from the little Honda to that, and it nearly killed me, and a month later sold it because it was too much for me to handle. And then I went to a Honda 350 Street Scrambler, then a second version of the Honda 350 called a Moto Sport, which was more off-road oriented, and a series of bikes after that. In college, I had the first year Honda XL 250, which was a wonderful bike. Honda was getting their ass handed to them by Yamaha, who had come out with a bike called a DT1, a 250cc two-cycle enduro bike. It was a much lighter and more nimble kind of motorcycle than the Honda had at the time. Mr. Honda didn't like two-stroke engines, so they built the Honda XL 250 to respond, and Honda dealers were very prosperous at that time, and they were waiting for 2 or 3 years for Honda to give them something to sell against the Yamaha dealer down the street. Finally, the XL 250 came. I remember having one when I was in college. I almost traded it for a BSA B50 MX, which was a more modern version of the 441 Victor. I just always liked the way those bikes looked, but I went riding with the guy with the B50. We traded bikes for a while, and I thought it was still too much bike for me. So I kept the XL 250. A classmate of mine, Jim Stevie, is here, and from high school, and from 5th grade. And after I went away to college and came back, because I rode a little Honda to high school, and in those days there were so many motorcycles. Our high school had a graduating class of 700-ish people, and there was 30, 40 motorcycles parked in a row on the street in front of the high school at that time. Every kid who had the means had a little motorcycle. And so that's the world that I, as a rider, grew up experiencing. Oh, one other side note to the origin story. When the movie Easy Rider came out with Peter Fonda, I had the Honda 90. I was 16 years old. And it was playing at the biggest movie theater in Duluth, in the center of downtown Duluth. And I didn't have any friends because I had a motorcycle and it was awkward. So I rode my Honda 90 to the first theatrical movie release of Easy Rider in a big theater. And I don't know if all of you know how the movie ends, but it ends with the guys getting killed by a redneck with a shotgun who shoots them out of the window of the passing pickup truck. Sorry for the spoiler if you haven't. Yeah. But I remember getting out of that theater and walking down the block in the dark to my little Honda 90, like scared to death. I had to ride home. So let's see. Let me catch my thread now. I always liked riding an awful lot. And when I would come home from college and run into guys like Jim, who's also a rider, other high school classmates would say to me, "Are you still riding those motorcycles?" And with the emphasis on the word still. And I kept thinking, because that was the feedback I was getting from my peers in society, my high school classmates, I kept thinking that somehow you would grow up and grow out of riding a motorcycle. By the time I was like 27 or 28 years old, I realized that that's never going to happen to me. That I would ride a motorcycle as long as I was physically able to ride a motorcycle, and that I wasn't going to grow out of it. So I bought a second. At that time I had a Can-Am dirt bike with like a snowmobile electrical system where you would idle it down and the lights would dim, and then you'd rev it up and the lights would get brighter. The state of Minnesota issued license plates for bikes like that back in those days. So I was riding it around on the street. It was very noisy and it had knobby tires, and I was going to AMA off-road motorcycle events called Enduros. I got some plastic trophies. I had a lot of fun, learned to ride lots better. And I decided I really was tired of worrying if the police were going to pull me over on this Can-Am. So I bought a used BMW, a model called an Airhead. With some of you know what it is, but they made it for many, many years. And the reason I chose it is because it was a fairly lightweight, big street bike with turn signals and had pretty long suspension, and I knew I would be riding it on gravel roads. It wasn't the model that later became the GS. It was just a plain BMW, but I put dirt tires on it, and it had low chrome pipes and stuff, and I rode it with dirt track tires. Because around this part of the United States, northern Minnesota, if you want to go riding a lot, you have to be able to go on a gravel road. There just isn't enough people here to have paved roads all over the place. So the decision to buy the BMW was me admitting that I wasn't going to grow out of motorcycling. So now I had two motorcycles. I had my Can-Am for Enduros, and then I had a street bike so I could go to work and go do my transportation. And once you're at two motorcycles, you're sort of toast. Then you're a motorcyclist for life. So I had to throw under the bus the idea that I was going to grow out of motorcycling. A couple of years, at the time I think I was working for my father, who had a small business with his brother and his mother in Duluth. And I was working for the family business, like a lot of kids with family businesses do. Wasn't doing so well working for my father. He wasn't doing so well employing me. And I thought maybe I would be happier emotionally if I had my own business. I watched how much my father loved being his own boss, having his own business. And I thought maybe that will help me have a happier life, because I wasn't really happy working for him. Just like today, though, nothing has changed. The best part of the day was always getting somewhere to work or wherever on my motorcycle, just like it was this morning. At that time, the industrial sewing business was leaving America for Asia as fast as people could auction off bankrupted sewing factories. There were about 2,000 people here at the peak doing commercial sewing here. They made winter coats. They made baby infant swaddling things. They made snowmobile suits and all kinds of stuff. There was an industry here. And lots of people were employed, but they were all gone and the factories were being auctioned off. I, through my father's business connections, had briefly worked at a business in Superior that sewed. And when they decided they were going to close, I became involved in helping organize the auction of their equipment. They had, I think, about 130 sewing machines, or maybe 90 or somewhere like that. And I knew what they were enough to help label it, to find auctioneers that specialized in this. And the deal I made was I was going to take 6 sewing machines or something like that and put them somewhere and figure out if I could make something. One of the things that I always was good at as a grade school kid and all the way through my life was making stuff. Didn't matter if you were whittling a stick or putting your broken mini bike back together. I just loved making stuff. So I thought you can buy these sewing machines, which brand new were $3,000 for $50. They were all going to Asia. The auction people were coming from Asia to buy our infrastructure in the 1980s, in the 1970s. And all the clothing that people were wearing was made, today what people are wearing is mostly made overseas. So I think I ended up with a dozen sewing machines after the auction was all over. My father and uncle had this building as part of their business activities and portfolio, but this building was boarded up, didn't have water, didn't have heat. It was just it looked like an abandoned building, and they didn't know what to do with it because at that year, Duluth had some bad economic times. There used to be a U.S. Air Force base here with F-102 and F-86 fighter interceptors where they were on 24-hour alert. This was before they developed intercontinental ballistic missiles. And the plan was when the Russian bombers came over the North Pole across Canada, they would sound a klaxon horn, and just like a fire hall with a pole, the pilots would slide down the pole and run out to their F-102s and fly up and intercept those Russian bombers and save us. There was about 6 or 8 of those Air Force bases across the northern strip of America, and this was one of them. They had 6,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 people here. They closed. That same year, U.S. Steel closed a steel manufacturing plant that made barbed wire. They had 5,000 or 6,000 people since 1915 in the west end of Duluth building barbed wire from the iron ore that they mined just north of here, about 70 miles. So that was 10,000 people that were lost to this city about at that time. Everyone who could leave left. The population when we graduated from high school was 103,000, and it went within 10 years down to about 85,000. There was actually a billboard in the city, "Will the last person out of Duluth please turn out the lights?" A very famous billboard. So things were very bad. There was 22 or 23% unemployment, and among the unemployed were about 1,500 garment workers. And I had 12 sewing machines. And I had this abandoned building. So I put a couple of kerosene heaters on the second floor, told my father and uncle, I'll be on the second floor, I'll get it going, and I'll try and figure out how to make something with these sewing machines. And I think I had about $25,000 in earnings and in savings bonds that grandparents had given me as a child, stuff like that. When I told my uncle, who was part owner of this building that was boarded up, what I was going to do, he said to me, he was my father's older brother and a very wise guy, and he said, "Andy, pioneering is for Daniel Boone." So that's how good I listened, as I decided to continue onward anyway. And what the factory that had this sewing, industrial sewing is, if you're going to make t-shirts, you have one kind of sewing machine. If you're going to make business suits, you have another kind. If you're going to make winter coats, you have another kind. This factory had been making snowmobile suits and ski jackets and stuff like that. So that's what I could make. I could have made, I looked at all the different things that these machines could make. And again, I told you I like fixing things. I got them all working, figured out how to make them sew. Set up on the second floor. My father and uncle charged me $400 a month rent for the second floor. 10 years later, 8 years later, they rented the first floor to somebody else for $400 a month, and I thought they'd been screwing me for all those years. Because if they're only... Side story. But let's see. So there was a lot of unemployment. I did not want to leave this area. I liked it here. All of the high school classmates that could leave did leave. The people that I grew up, when I would go shopping in the stores, there would be, forgive the bad characterization, but it was clear there were a lot of handicapped or slow people, what I used to call the left behinds, the people who couldn't leave. Jim went to play hockey in Europe professionally, right?
Yeah, a couple years.
Yeah, everybody left who could leave. But I didn't want to leave, maybe because I'm a little bit autistic or something, and I liked knowing my way around. It was comfortable here. So I wanted to prove to myself I could make a living here just like my father, my uncle, and my grandparents had done a generation earlier. So I got these sewing machines, set them up there on the second floor, got some desks, old office furniture, whatever I could scrounge. And it was a lot of scrounging. These tables we made, these chairs Lynn bought for like $5 a piece at some point or something. Do you remember?
Yeah, they came from a school.
It came from a school. And you found them and said, we can use some chairs. So the whole place has been put together that way. Eventually, our business grew pretty rapidly in the first 15 years, and that's the second part of the story. And when the leaseholders of the floor above us and the floor below us, we had several tenants above us, several tenants below us, but eventually we took over the whole building and eventually bought the building. And just as a psychological side note, I still wasn't a very happy person when the business was growing. Lynn, who's been with me for 33 years, helped me tremendously coping with. So a lot of times you read about movie stars or rock stars that start drinking after they start selling a few records, or they start using drugs and they have to go to rehab. I had some of that same. I didn't start drinking, I didn't start using drugs. I couldn't figure out though why I wasn't as happy as my father and uncle. I had a business, it was making money, it was growing, I should have been in heaven. I wasn't. But that's another story. And eventually I did learn that I'm okay and I could handle the success. But it was quite a few years of being pretty neurotic about it. I think that's the origin of the business story. The other piece for you riders is what to make and coming up with what to make. I could have made fly fishing vests. I could have made offshore sailing, fall weather gear. I knew I wanted to make something that had something to do with something that I liked personally to do, that I knew something about. I looked at ski jackets, and there was a million great ski jackets made all over the world. I couldn't make a better ski jacket. I looked at the personal flotation devices that are like vests. Stearns made great. I couldn't do better than that. Fly fishing vests, Orvis and other companies were making great fly fishing vests. At the time, there were only 3 ways to dress for motorcycling: leather clothing, English waxed cotton clothing, denim, and windbreakers. Steve McQueen wore a thin nylon windbreaker because he was invincible. There was only a few long-distance touring riders, and some of those were waxed cotton. The Harley people wore a mixture of leather and denim. And I thought maybe, because I was also interested in hiking and backpacking and rock climbing, this new thing called Gore-Tex might be a useful thing. You'd buy in those days a cheap nylon rain suit. It was plastic coated on the inside, and you were more wet from your perspiration than the rain by the time you'd ridden a few miles. So I thought maybe this Gore-Tex would work, and maybe if I could get it applied to a heavy abrasion-resistant fabric, that would work pretty good as a motorcycle clothing, if I could find a way to put armor in it. I went to the Gore-Tex company, told them my idea. They said, "We're not interested, go away." There was a company making a copy of Gore-Tex. There was 5 or 6 companies making copies of Gore-Tex at the time. I picked the one that I thought was the closest, best copy. And they said, yeah, we will try to put the membrane on a heavy fabric like I wanted Corduro, because that was made originally to reinforce tire cords. When you bought nylon bias belted tires, that was Corduro nylon inside of the rubber tire. But Corduro looked like it was cost effective. pretty light, and if we could get somebody to put the membrane on the backside of the Cordura nylon, we would maybe have something we could work with. So this other company sold us that, and the lamination of the membrane worked out okay. And there was a couple of great pattern makers. One was named Susie Hagee, who worked here, and they were from the old school sewing industry that used to be in Duluth, and they were very tolerant. One of them wasn't tolerant of the idea. I can't remember the one who wasn't. They both passed now. But anyway, we came up with this coverall. I wanted to step in and out. I did not want it to have a zipper to here and then zippers down the outside of each leg. I wanted to step in because the goal was to be able to dress like we're dressed sitting around the room here in street clothes and have something to just instantly put on over it, hanging in the garage or hanging wherever, so that you could ride to work in street clothes, whether it be a business suit, or whatever. I didn't want to change into denim and leather, and I had a wax cotton jacket as a kid and an enduro rider, and they were smelly and they were heavy and they were hot. And also they didn't wear well. My enduro jacket was made in England, and I probably wore it out in 4 or 5 years. You'd put a wrench in the pocket and it would land on the ground because the holes were worn in the cotton. It was a nice stuff. Your cotton is very nice, but it's not as durable as the Cordura. It's more comfortable, it's warmer, but not quite as durable as Cordura. So we came up with this coverall so that you could commute, so that you could use your motorcycle every day. One of the things you learn as a rider when you've been riding a while is it's only perfect riding weather conditions about 5% of the time. The rest of the time it's either too hot or too cold or too windy or too dry or something. So the coverall makes it easier to ride more days, and especially the climate here in Duluth. Those of you who've been here for a couple days know that yesterday it was 82 degrees and today it is 62 degrees. To ride a motorcycle regularly here, I needed an armored coverall I could get in and out of, wear over my street clothes. So that is what the Aerostich business was established to produce. And it was in large part a snowmobile suit with armor and reflective and zipper vents and ergonomically arranged pockets. It was what I wanted. And my hope was that there would be others like myself around the country, maybe around the world, who wanted to use a motorcycle instead of a car, which is what I wanted to do, and they wanted something they could just jump into and go. And it was very difficult to persuade experienced riders to try this. They laughed at it, and the more experienced the rider, with a very few exceptions, the more they laughed. We sent one of the first ones to an editorial reviewer who worked for one of the BMW magazines to do an evaluation. The only thing I knew to get the word out was to little ads there was no internet, the little ads in the back of the magazine, and then you'd send them a free thing and say, please try it, and then write about it, a product story. And the one evaluator said, these are very nice pockets if you want to carry fish. So that was a sort of a backhanded, not very nice. He didn't understand the suit and the purpose, and most experienced riders didn't understand the suit or the purpose. And the reason people didn't understand the suit or the purpose is unique to America. We're the only country that went, as the industrial age and the industrial revolution dawned, we're the only country that went right to cars. Thanks to Henry Ford and the Model T. You could buy a Model T Ford for the same price as a motorcycle, and in some cases less. There's a classic story from the beginnings of motorcycling. Two people, it's a hard rainstorm, two people arrive at a destination at the same time. One's on a motorcycle, one's in a Model T with doors and windows. The guy gets out of the Model T, looks at the motorcyclist who's dripping wet, and says, "Don't you wish you had a car?" And the motorcyclist says, "No, but I wish it would stop raining." And that's how I feel about riding. And that's what the Aerostich coverall is established to do. But in America, because we went right to cars, unlike Europe and Asia, and even though there were nice motorcycles available, they were toys, almost from the beginning here. So 90% of all of the customers and all of the cycle magazine writers and editors were oriented, and including Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, Kawasaki, Harley Davidson, they were oriented to making and marketing toys. And motorcycling consumption was a lot like downhill skiing consumption. It was a recreational and a sport activity for 90% or more of riders, because everybody in America had a Chevy or a Toyota to go to work in, and then on a nice sunny day, they would go out riding. So what did they need an all-weather armored coverall that was easy to get in and out of for? They didn't. They wanted to look cool. They wanted to look like they knew what they were doing, and that meant they had to follow the fashions of motorcycling. If Kenny Roberts or Dick Mann dressed like this, or Steve McQueen dressed like that, then motorcyclists had to dress like that. So the cycle magazine editors didn't get it. The cycle manufacturers didn't get it. Nobody really got it. So to stay solvent, we sort of morphed the business in a recreational direction. I only wanted to make the coveralls that are hanging on that wall behind you, over here. Excuse me for a second. So we started adding two-piece versions of the suit. We originally cut a one-piece. People were buying, the early adopters were the people like Paul and Vonnie Glaze, who's sitting right there. They wanted to ride a lot of miles. Between the two of them, they've got over 2 million miles behind them. That's a lot. And when you want to ride that much, you want stuff that works. You don't need to look in the mirror to show that you're Steve McQueen or you're Fonzie or you're fashionable. You just want something that works. It's a tool, it's a piece of equipment. So early riders who like to ride a lot, like Paul and Vonnie, were adopting this because it was lighter, because it was cooler, because it was more versatile, because the pockets were ergonomic, because it had vents, because it had reflective so the cars could see you at night, on and on. All the stuff that I had put into this product did make it an easier, better solution for many riders who were recreationally riding. And the first ones were these hardcore, everyday riders. So people took the one-piece suit and went to Alaska or South America or wherever, and they said, why don't you make a two-piece? We really think that traveling on a motorcycle would be better on a two-piece. So we cut a one-piece in half, literally, and cobbled it together and started selling camping equipment and recreational-oriented stuff to keep our business solvent. But the purpose of Aerostich is to sell these one-piece coveralls, and because it's a piece of equipment, not fashion, it doesn't change much from year to year to year, although we keep improving it internally. It's a tool. When you look at the tools professional tradespeople use, whether you're a home builder, a bricklayer, a car mechanic, whatever, if you have a tool, you don't care what it looks like. You want it as light as possible, as easy to handle as possible, and as durable as possible. And those were the overriding concerns that I had as the designer of the product. As light as possible, as durable as possible. It was pretty simple to me, but the cycle magazine editors thought that the pockets were nice for carrying fish. A few early writers did catch on. I sent a lot of suits to magazine writers and editors in Southern California. And the way they produced, that was the center of the motorcycle magazine universe. All the magazines were made in Southern California. The people who did write them and create them, they usually would live in this part of LA, and they would ride 22 miles across to where their office was and sit at a typewriter here. In the morning, it was cool and misty every morning in Los Angeles, and then they would leave at 5 o'clock to ride home, and it was 100 degrees and hot and dry. They liked the suit because it worked really good for that. And so they told their other editors at their magazine and at other magazines, you got to get one of these. This really works for what we're doing. In other words, they were working, commuting motorcycle riders like few consumers were doing with their motorcycles. But they had to do that. That was their job. So they got it. After a few years, enough magazine editors showed up at cycle introductions of, like when BMW would introduce a new model, they would invite all these guys on what's called a press junket. And so many people were showing up on press junket deals to test new motorcycles that they were all in Aerostich suits. To the point that at 1 year or 2 years, the BMW company said, yeah, you can wear your Aerostich suit, but if you're going to be in pictures, you have to be in one of our suits or something else. You can't be in an Aerostich suit. So the company grew relatively quickly, despite my narrow interest in commuting and everyday utility motorcycling. To channel some of the feelings I had about riding into something that was not in the pages of our catalogs or our marketing stories, we created the Ride to Work Day nonprofit organization. So we have all over the world, people 1 day a year ride their motorcycles to work as a demonstration that motorcycles can be useful. And that gave me a chance to put some of my baloney out into the world without polluting the story of buying Aerostich, this, that, or the other thing. I think that's the origin. That's part one of my talk today. Switching to the thank yous, I first want to thank all of you who are our customers. One of the most gratifying, and it makes me emotional to tell you this, but I'm what was the guy, Lou Gehrig's disease, I'm the luckiest man in the world, the famous. The customers we've had over the years have, with a few small exceptions, been the most wonderful and the most amazing people to get to know, to get to meet. This has been a tremendous experience for me and my coworkers to meet you all and hundreds and hundreds of other people like you. Thank you for buying our products. Thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for your interest in Aerostich. You've been a gift to this business. It's fun. I'm very lucky to be able to walk outside of here and see all these cool motorcycles all summer. Talk to people from all over the world. Last night, a guy he's here maybe today, from England, riding around the world, a retired British police officer. Had a 10-minute conversation with him last night in Duluth, Minnesota. Couldn't believe it. And that happens all the time here. So thank you all for buying our products. The second group of people I need to thank are the people like Lynn, who's taken care of me and managed and operated the business for, in her case, 33 years. We have a lot of people here that are 15, 20, and 30-year people. From the top to the bottom, this has been a wonderful group of people. Your life is, as everyone knows, too short to work with people you can't stand. So if you have a job and the people are jerks, get a different job, even if it pays less. Life is too short. Well, the people here have taken care of me and each other in a way that I don't think happens in very many businesses. I feel very lucky and proud and grateful to know Lynn, Reb, Stephanie is here today. This business, as much as any business, runs itself because the people take care of each other. We're very lucky to have these people here. Thank you, Lynn, and there's not much more to say. And last but definitely not least, I have to thank my family members, including my wife Molly, who's right here, my mother-in-law, Shar, who's right here. My family has, even though my uncle was funny with the Daniel Boone joke, my family was mostly quite supportive, including my father and uncle. There were times when we needed money and banks weren't very happy, and I was able to borrow money from them. Today we still owe money after 40 years, which I'm not a socialist or anything, but it's pretty funny to have a business and still owe money after 40 years. But it's been worth it. So thanks to my wife, my mother-in-law, and my family. They've been amazing. I come from a very nice family, and I married into a just as nice family, and that's been that. So I think that covers the thank you. You're a coworker too over there. That's Shay on the camera. I think that takes that's that, and then that's, let's see, the origin story. My theories about motorcycling are next. Basically, in a sentence, motorcycling is good for you. It is not on the public health radar. It is not on the science radar. But when you look around the world and you look at yourself, when you look at yourself in a mirror and when you look around the world, you know, we're taught as kids that we have 5 senses: hearing and touch and vision and stuff like that. Really, there's a lot more senses, and I'm not highly educated with science, but we have a sense of balance is one of our senses, and we have other senses, and the way our sense of balance works, and it doesn't matter whether you believe in the Darwinian evolution or scientific creationism or what, it doesn't matter what you believe, we have a sense of balance. We were made to balance. We are made to wiggle, to dance, to move, and the way that works, as simply stated as I know how to tell it, is the mechanisms in our inner ear send dopamine, endorphins, other stuff into the chemistry of our brain. And when we go skiing for a day, or when we go surfing, or when we go sailing, which is a balancing of the side forces of the sail and the rudder and the keel, or when we go bicycling or motorcycling or skating, anything that uses our sense of balance, even when we just walk a block, it's good for us. Again, it doesn't matter how we got that way, but it's medicine of the best kind. It's a holistic benefit. And the minute that you spend every day seeking the comfort of a car or even a recumbent bicycle, the minute you stop using that, you're not as healthy. And some people are more connected to the need for that, as I was as a child and still am, and all of you in this room are. We need that. We need that every day. It isn't something that the people who sell us cars, or the people who build roads, or the people who find and refine and distribute gasoline, or the healthcare industry, they don't want us to think about this. But it's fundamental to who we are and what kind of animals we are, what kind of an organism, how we operate. Our operating system depends on using balance. When you, there's a stereotype of a sort of spaced out surfer, and all he wants to do is paddle out, catch a wave, paddle out, catch a wave, again and again and again. Well, you can't surf to work. You can't surf to get groceries. When you're done with a day of downhill or cross-country skiing, you're tired and you're as blissed out as you are after a day of motorcycling. When you guys go on a 4 or 5 day, 3 or 4 day motorcycle trip and you get home, you look at yourself and you look at the bike, and all you really want to do is get back on the bike and ride some more, as Bonnie and Paul have done for 2 million plus miles. That blissed out feeling is good for us. And the proof, to me, is when you look at the after World War II success of all of the countries across Asia, from Korea to Japan, to the Philippines, to China, to Vietnam, through the India and Burma and Thailand and all those places. What happened after World War II? Some of those places were bombed to rubble, but everyone got to their job or their work site or their schoolhouse or whether they were a student, whether they were a teacher, they all got from point A to point B on a little bicycle or a little motorcycle. And so when they got up in the morning, brushed their teeth, went to school, went to work, did whatever they had to do, they were balancing. And that made them better coworkers, better students, better whatever they were doing, better husbands, better wives. At the end of the day, they got on their two-wheel thing and they balanced their way home, and they were a better husband, wife, child, parent, whatever the heck they were. Those societies and those countries that I'm mentioning, they all had slightly different forms of government. It didn't matter whether they were a democracy, a dictatorship, a socialist, whatever. They all had different forms of governance. They all had different cultural values. What they had in common was cohesion as a society. And that was produced by everybody riding when they needed to go from here to there because of how our inner ear works. Now, if you want to believe in the Darwinian side of the story, we started out swinging from vines and hanging from trees before we were even human. Whatever the cause, it doesn't matter. We need that medicine. And we motorcyclists get it every day in our lives. And that's what the coverall that we established Aerostich to make is all about. Some famous people, including Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect, and Winston Churchill, the political leader, they say, people a lot smarter than me, that we create our tools. That means we invent the mastery of fire, or a stone axe, or a spear, or that aluminum table, or that wooden chair, or the computer, or any. We create our stuff. We build our houses. We build our buildings. And then let's say we decide we want to invent a fry pan out of cast iron. Suddenly we have a new way to cook food. That changes. Once we build it, once we start living in it, once we start using the tools we imagine and we create, the tools then change us. They change how we operate. So you live in a house with central heating is different than living in a house with a wood stove. It changes how we are. So I don't know exactly how to tie this up, but that we have created a world with an infrastructure around us that is all over the advanced and quote-unquote developed part of the world is safe, it's comfortable, we got pavement out there, not gravel, we got central heating buildings, we got running water, we got plumbing and toilets, we got all this technology, electricity in the ceiling. And everywhere else we want electricity. Because of the way we built the world and we imagined our tools, our fry pans or whatever, because of where we are right now in technology, in human history, we can't walk everywhere we need to go doing this balance thing. In Duluth and Superior and the surrounding towns of Cloquet and Hermantown, a lot of people might work in Hermantown and live in Superior, or vice versa. Or live 2 miles out of town in the North Shore, or live on that hillside and work over there, 15 miles away. How do you integrate a healthy life with the infrastructure and with the world of tools and equipment and buildings and roads that we've built, all for our convenience, all for our comfort, all for our safety, sprawled out? How do you integrate that and still get a dose of that medicine? You can't downhill ski to work. You can't surf to work. And in many cases, you can't bicycle to work. But you can ride to work. And for the 80% or 90% of the days that the weather isn't perfect, this armored coverall is the way to do that. And that's why this business is important. And that's why the mainstream of the motorcycle industry, which is selling toys to us and recreation, and there's nothing wrong with all of that. But that's why they don't get what we're doing. That's why the suit that we make is graded into 61 sizes, because it is a tool and it better fit if you're going to use it as a tool. And the average motorcycle, I'll close on this, the average motorcycle in America is ridden, I think, about 1,500 miles a year. That means that you go out for ice cream or a beer on a nice day. And that's it. The average Aerostich suit customer rides 5,000 to 20,000 miles a year. 4 times what the average motorcyclist rides. Because he wants a dose of that medicine. So he may look at the ads for the hottest, newest bike or the coolest this, but he knows in his gut, in his brain, in his heart, that the reason he rides is because he or she rides is because it makes him feel good. It makes him a better, or her a better husband or wife or parent or student or whatever they are. When you get this dose of this medication that you get from balancing in your life every day, you perform better as a person. And better performing people make better societies, make better civilization. And all the people who are selling us, I like cars, I own 2 cars, but they're selling us our comforts. That's like eating Cheez-Its and pizza and not broccoli and not carrots. The motorcycle is that. It is a health technology that's a heck of a lot of fun to use. And that's the proof. When something is fun, it's good. Thank you all for listening, and I will take any questions you want. Yes?
I want to know the technique for a 100-pound kid to kickstart a 441.
Wow. I couldn't. That's why I had the bike less than 5 weeks or something like that. I was black and blue all over by the time I was done with it. And I had to go back to a regular little Japanese bike. And like a lot of young people, you all who've raised children or been children yourselves know, when you're a child, your eyes are often bigger than your stomach. And that was me at that age. You can't. I was black. I literally was black and blue. It was such a pretty bike, though. Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you for hosting this. I'm going to try to get a question out of this without maybe having a senior moment here, but I was very fascinated by the last part of your talk where you talked about the healthiness of riding motorcycles. I understand that Royal Enfield, which for most of its life was a British motorcycle industry, is now in India, has been for a long time. They sell 1 million bikes a year, and I suspect it's not to recreational riders. I mean, there's some of that in London, and some of the urban areas of America, but I would guess most of their bikes are sold as an inexpensive form of transportation, maybe even a work vehicle.
It's changing. As countries get rich, as societies get more educated, everybody wants, outside of the United States, essentially wants to duplicate or emulate what we have here in the United States. So they turn motorcycles, they meaning the car makers, the road builders, the gasoline refiners, the governments. Everybody wants to give their people, quote unquote, 2 chickens in every pot. And motorcycles go from utility to toy status as countries get richer and more educated, which is sad. That's in China, which was built because everybody got to work on a bicycle or a little motorcycle. The last 15 years, they've been banning motorcycles from certain cities, and they want everybody to have a little electric car in China. Great, but they don't understand what made them able to, there was 2 things that made Asia work after World War II. One was the Green Revolution. There was an agronomist, food scientist in Mexico who figured out the nitrogen cycle in the 1950s and 60s. So suddenly, agricultural productivity came up and there was no longer famine in Asia. When I was in high school, about 100 to 150,000 people in one section of Mao Zedong's China actually died from starvation while I was in high school. The key to the cohesive success, forgetting about the form of government, the totalitarian dictatorship, the key to the success was that everybody got everywhere. And when the country got rich, the people in power said, we'll give you roads, we'll give you apartments, have a car, have an American lifestyle. Motorcycles become toys. That's, in my short word, the shortest way I can say that is, from my worldview, that's a tragedy for people and for the world.
I was just wondering, and I almost hesitated to ask, because I didn't want to sound like I was going into a stereotype, but these people that, when I think of Royal Enfield in India, I think of these guys with 60 or 80 pounds of stuff strapped on this little bike, and they're obviously working or they're shopping or something like that. It's less a recreation vehicle. I rode three hours up here to listen to you talk. That was a recreation time for me, and I spent those 3 hours thinking about some of the things you said on the way home. But I wonder if they're benefiting in the way that you claim to be.
Anybody who's,
and maybe not even know it because they're actually going to work or they're delivering something or they're shopping and bringing
right,
stuff.
they don't, nobody does know it. I'll tell you my favorite story since I started this business about people who don't really know it. And about 3 years ago, Lynn and others here tasked me with becoming a blogger. To write, you can go on the Aerostich website and there's the blogs, most of which I write. And I wrote about this. And I told somebody yesterday this story. And I love telling this story. There's gathering in Minneapolis. There's First Thursday at Delano's Pizza. If you remember, the 500 or 1,500 motorcycles will gather, have a pizza, stand around in the parking lot, and look at each other's motorcycles. There's one of those in Milwaukee that I'd always heard about it called, I don't think they do it anymore, called the Rocker Box. And the Rocker Box is a big version of the motorcycle night, and everywhere there's a bike night. This is a great big bike. It's a Saturday or a Sunday, and there's a residential street with trees overhanging, and it goes for 10 or 15 blocks, and like 1,000 or 2,000 motorcyclists put their tire to the curb, and they walk around in this, and there's bands set up on the streets that are blocked off, playing rockabilly music, and it's a fabulous event. I'd never been, I'd always heard of it. It's about a 5 or 6 hour ride from here. I decided I would go to Rocker Box 1 year, rode down there, put my bike on the curb, started walking down the street, looking at amazing motorcycles from Milwaukee, from Madison, from Chicago, from all over this pretty populated part of the Midwest. And I got tired after walking about 5 or 6 blocks. And there was a corner neighborhood bar with a bench that would hold 3 or 4 or 5 people on it in front of the bar on the sidewalk at this corner. And the next to the bar was another house and another house and another house. It was a residential neighborhood. Anyway, I was tired of walking. I sat down in front of this bar just to rest my feet and sort of take in the scene. A block and a half away, there was a rockabilly band playing that I could hear softly, and there was people walking all over the place. And after a few minutes, an elfin-like elderly man, maybe in his early mid-80s, sits down next to me. And being social and having just ridden there and been full of endorphins and bliss from riding, I said to the guy something like, I said, I think, my name's Andy, and he said, my name is Phil, or whatever his name was. And I said, so which one of these is yours? And he points to a moped with pedals on the sidewalk in front of the bar, just on the other side of the entrance to the bar. And the moped isn't just any moped, it's been equipped for travel and camping like the Jode automobile in the Grapes of Wrath. There is literally baling twine and like cheap bungee cords and junk all over it, capped off by a 1-gallon lawnmower gas can with a bungee cord through the handle, just hanging there, and a sleeping bag, and pots and pans. It was quite an assemblage. And I took it in, and I said, you rode that here? Yep. Where'd you come from? He deadpans Minneapolis. My jaw hit the floor. Rode that thing here from Minneapolis. How long did it take you? He said, 3 days. And then he started telling me how he'd had to rebuild them after so many miles because the little piston wears out and certain brands were better than others, and how he'd mopeded from Minneapolis to Sturgis a couple of times. This guy was 86 years old or whatever, and he was an elf. And then a couple of pretty girls come by in their 20s, and he gets up and starts dancing with one of the girls. Now, I've never been forward enough to do that. I have pictures of this in my camera.
Those kind of guys can get away with that.
Yes, and he's flirting with these girls, and all I could think of was, I want to end my riding life like this guy. And then he sits back down and he says, where are you from? I said, Duluth. And he says, oh, I know somebody from Duluth, Andy Goldfine, great guy. And I said, I am Andy Goldfine. And he looked at me and he said, no. But that's really the blessing, if there is such a blessing of having a small business like this. It doesn't get any better than that.
You actually had a Rider of the Month guy from, I think, the West Coast who's been on a cannonball thing on Vespas.
Yeah.
That's all they ever wrote.
Yeah, that's all he ever rides. We had a guy here, a Rider of the Month, with the most radical looking chopper you've ever seen, with like a 24-inch forks extension, and he's ridden it all over the world. He's an ex-electrician, had an electrical contracting business, wiring fancy multi-million-dollar houses in Boulder, Colorado and stuff, and eventually he got tired and decided he was going to be a motorcycle bum, and he built a chopper. He's owned 2 bikes. His first one was a Sportster. His second one was a Softail. And now the Softail looks like it's an old knucklehead. It's covered with grease and mud and dirt. It's ridden it all over the world. If you go to the Rider of the Month, you'll look him up and read about his story because it's fascinating. And that's another cool thing about this company is the mixture of people that come here are on Vespas and on adventure bikes. And one of you guys out here has a fancy Goldwing, I think. It's a beautiful bike. And there's a couple of probably, hopefully, crappy, dumpy bikes out here too. You do swim upstream when you choose to ride a lot. These people here, Paul and Vonnie, will tell you that insurance, if you're ever on a traffic trial there's an accident and you're sitting in front of a judge or a jury, the judge got to that courtroom in a car, every member of the jury got to that courtroom in a car, good luck getting a fair trial. It is hard and in many parts of the country, when you're in a big city with everybody today, the cars, when I was young, you can't go to a person under 30 years old and make this gesture like this. They won't know what you're talking, roll your window down? No, what, huh? They don't understand. The cars today are sealed. There's no heater controls. It's climate control. You set the temperature. It gives you a perfect environment. The windows, on a 70-degree day here in Duluth, in traffic, 2/3 of the cars are driving around with their windows up. I believe, rightly or wrongly, that part of the problems the country is facing now with extreme partisanship on all sides of the political spectrum, and people who want to do Mennonite, Amish, Hutterite, homeschool, whatever, all this stuff is because there is signs that certain things are breaking down. And I attribute some of the breaking down of the social contract. It doesn't matter whether you're to the right or to the left or woke or whatever, it doesn't matter. Some of the breakdown is because we're siloing ourselves off with our smartphones, with our sealed automobiles, with the life is not the same as it was when most of you grew up. And the people have sold us in the form of technology, essentially a diet of cotton candy and Cheez-Its. And society is not as healthy as it was when I was a child. And I can't fix that, but if we figured out a way to bias people's mobility decisions a little more in favor of riding motorcycles with coveralls, I would be a lot richer, but society would be a lot better off, in my opinion. Yes?
When Andy grew up, houses had front porches.
Yep.
The neighborhood, Leggett Street, Andy could probably roll through several backyards
Yep.
without fences.
Yep.
Now we've turned things around, and people have in their backyard a 6 or 8 foot privacy fence
Yep.
and a patio.
Yep.
And there are intervening fences, the kids can't roam the neighborhood, the people in the house 3 doors down don't know. All the kids, like when I was growing up, I could be blocks away and if I messed up. My mom got a phone call
Yep.
before I got home.
My wife is on a committee for an organization called the Superior is the city right over the bridge here. And there's an organization that does porch music called Superior Porch Fest, and she's on the board and works very hard all summer to bring live music to neighborhoods where people volunteer their driveways or porches where people can set up bands. And I've been to a couple of them. 2 nights ago or 3 nights ago, it was at Barker's Island over in Superior where that old ship is on display. And maybe 100 people showed up. You can talk. Almost 200 people showed up. There's an appetite. We are a social animal. We are a social species. And the people who are selling us are marketing to us our comforts. I'm not saying everybody should be a Stoic like the old Greek philosophers, but the Amish, Hutterite, Mennonite people understand something that the mainstream doesn't. You got to look at your technology very carefully and how you use it. And the majority of people aren't interested in that. And there's a lot of money to be made in just selling people what they want. This company is small because we have a coverall that's in 61 sizes. There's no motorcycle store that's going to want to carry 61 sizes of the same thing. They want small, medium, and large, extra large in 61 styles. So everybody can be a quote-unquote individual. Fine. But we're small, and I'm happy with the life this has given me and that you're here to listen to me. I couldn't be happier. But motorcycling is a social good. Motorcycling is, as long as you don't get run over by a truck and killed. Yes?
So, speaking of that social aspect, I spent a lot of time in the truck running around, and you see someone you kind of recognize, so you give them a hey, and all you see is 2 hands, right?
Yeah.
You see another bike come along, right?
Yeah.
And you're always nod of your head, a hand up. It's pretty cool. So it's kind of nice.
On my way home from work yesterday, I have a 5-mile commute, and I'm a block away from here at the stoplight, just up the corner there. And I'm on my little white Honda 650 single-cylinder commuting bike, which I've ridden for many years, and comes up beside me a guy on a noisy as heck unmuffled chopper, wearing denim. And we just happen to park side by side, and I look over and I go, "Nice bike, what year is it?" He goes, "It's 71. And I go, oh no, he goes a 90, whatever, they were like 2 years apart. Mine's a 94, and his was a 92. Completely different style of bikes, but we were out in the world, under the wind, sky, rain, hot, cold. We had something in common, and our bikes were only 2 years apart, but completely different style. And I'm guessing he puts his away when the winter comes. I don't. Yes?
I found it real interesting when you were talking about how the motorcycle business is basically selling toys.
And sports vehicles, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm probably an atypical Aerostich customer in that I get around on 2 wheels, but it's bicycles. And I've been an Aerostich customer for a long time because of the different stuff that you have. But in the bike world, we have the same damn problem.
But there's gurus in the bike world also, like Grant Peterson from Rivendell, who I know. I used to have to go to California on my bike pretty regularly to talk to Cycle Magazine editors, and I once showed up at his door, got the grant. He was surprised to see me. He was one of the one of the most surprising and fun compliments I ever received is Grant was in. Bicyclists have more social stature than us motorcycle bums are. Bicyclists went to college, they had all this good. So somebody from a magazine was interviewing this Grant Peterson fellow who's sort of interested in the same sorts of things I am, and he makes and designs sort of old school bicycles. No carbon fiber, no disc brakes, but really nice, beautiful bicycles that are expensive and that you can hand down to your children. They're beautiful machines. And somebody was interviewing this guy for like a Men's Journal magazine or one of those sort of highbrow marketing useless magazines. And so So what do you got on your night table, Grant? Because he's also a very good writer. He's written a couple of really good books, some of which we sell about lifestyle and fitness subjects. And so somebody was interviewing him from a highbrowish magazine and said, what do you got on your night table? And he said, I'm reading the this, the that, and I got an Aerostich catalog. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. We've had a lot of fun here, as you can, I hope, tell, listening to me. Anybody else? Okay, you guys, stay out of trouble. That's it. What? Yeah, I do. What's your name?
I am Grandma, and I walk. I told Bonnie, I don't bite, but our daughter,
Her name is Charlene Milroy.
I live in Superior.
And her name is...
If you were in my category, if you can remember the name Kilroy, you can remember Milroy.
Randy Nelson, okay.
Molly Duluth.
Duncan Thunderbay, David Thunderbay,
Peter Sylvester and Elmore.
Shay Duluth, Murphy Washburn, Wisconsin, Kim from Orono,
Where?
Orono, Minnesota.
Where's that?
It's just in Minneapolis.
Nice.
Nice Sue, his wife, same place.
Jeff from Wichita, Kansas.
Bonnie from Texas.
Paul from Texas. John Summerdoor from Mountain View, Minnesota. Mike Ryan, Peoria, Illinois.
Sue from Superior.
Brett from Malmo.
I'm Steve Johnston from St. Michael, Minnesota.
Doug Robinson from Duluth.
I'm Ken Peterson from Superior.
Scott Lynn from Maple Grove.
Lynn from Superior.
Well, there's a few snacks out there. We have coffee. We have bottled water up in the store. Thank you again for coming. I think I can turn this off now, can't I? That's it. Thank you.